All right, everybody. I wanted to give this a couple days and try to formulate some thoughts about it before I just fired a video off without thinking it through. What I wanted to say first, just to preface this a little bit, the main thing, the lens I'm looking through this with would actually be three different ways. First of all, seeing what I saw in the first video where he was kneeling on him for 846. Obviously, we've seen that video. That can't be unseen. The second way I approach this is I'm thinking about it in terms of how the media and Keith Ellison, I guess he withheld this, apparently. Maybe I'm wrong on this. I believe I had read that he withheld this so he could properly prosecute the individuals involved. So the media, of course, portraying it the way they did, not having this video. So now that they have the video, how is this going to change the narrative for them and the frequency that the video is shown on these mainstream news channels? And third, and probably I'll talk about this part of it a little bit more during the video and afterwards, is after seeing what you're about to see, would this change your opinion on the charges, innocence or guilt of Chauvin, plus the additional officers as well, the three other individuals who were charged? Does having this to go with the other video, would it change your perspective if you were on the jury pool versus just having that one video, the 846 video? All right, so let's watch a little bit and let me know what you think. I'm talking more so on the juror side. The media, we know what they're going to do with this. Ellison, we know he's a piece of garbage. So the main thing I'd like to hear from individuals, if you're leaving a comment, is if you were on the jury now, seeing all of this together, tell me how you felt first off, just seeing that first video a couple months ago, the 846 video, and now seeing this, if you were an individual who was like, oh yeah, that's murder for sure, does this move it back the other way for you?
Let me see your hands. Damn, man. Stay in the car. Let me see your other hand. I'm sorry. Let me see your other hand. Both hands. Put your hands up right now. Let me see your other hand. Put your hand up there. Put your hand up there. Hands on the wheel. Hands on the wheel. I'm sorry, son. Pulse is in the car. Put your foot back in.
God dang, man. Man, I got shot the same way as I was before.
Okay, well, when I say let me see your hands, you put your hands up. You got them?
Man, dang, man.
Put your hands on top of your head.
Last time I got shot like that,
Hands on top of your...
First off, they said Floyd had drugs in his system in his autopsy. I believe fentanyl was there. It's either meth or coke. You can fact check me on that and let me know what it was if you know for sure. He obviously isn't compliant. It goes on and gets worse if you've seen the rest of the video. Once the officer here, and I assume this is Chauvin here, once Floyd has his hands on the steering wheel, or then on his head, then back on the steering wheel, then puts his head on the steering wheel, he says, do you have him? I assume he was asking the other officer if he had coverage on the other passengers just to make sure they weren't a threat. Once he got confirmation of that, you hear him holster the weapon. So that's where we're at right now. The verbiage, the foul language, if you want to make a case about that, that's up to you. If somebody's not complying, what are you going to do, right?
Step out of the vehicle and step away from me, all right? Step out and face away. Step out and face away.
Please don't shoot me. Please, man.
I'm not going to shoot you. Step out and face away.
I'll look you out, man. Please don't shoot me, man. Please, man. I just lost my mom, man.
Step out and face away. Step out and face away.
Please don't shoot me, Mr. Officer. Please don't shoot me, man.
Step out and face away.
Can you not shoot me, man?
I'm not shooting you. Step out and face away.
Okay. Please, man. Please. I didn't know, man.
Get out of the car.
I didn't know, Mr. Officer. I didn't know.
Stop resisting, his passenger says. Observations here. Still resisting. The thought I had, not having consumed illicit narcotics myself, Is it possible? What do you think of this? Is it possible that if he was indeed on drugs at the time, or if it was at a state where it impaired him? You could have drugs in your system and they could have been done 12 hours ago or 24 hours ago. If, though, he's being impaired by the drugs or somehow impacted, is it possible that he's really hyping it up or exaggerating the situation, kind of creating a state of fear, or we say delirium or paranoia, where as if it were you and I and we just got pulled over and we weren't on drugs or didn't have it in our system, or say we weren't drunk versus being drunk, would the stop have gone the same way? Additionally, though, if it's true that he was shot during a previous stop, and I haven't looked into that, it may be true, would that have heightened his paranoia? Let's say he wasn't on the drugs at the time. Let's say the drugs weren't influencing him at the time. Would that heighten his paranoia or that PTSD, right? It would be understandable in a way. But if you have a situation where he had been shot and the drugs had some kind of control over him at the time, is that really a multiplying factor to where we see this kind of behavior? Again, not dismissing it, but I'm just introducing things that I think the jury should be thinking about when they deliberate or when they're watching this video itself. We're going to move ahead a little bit in the video. You see his two passengers here being questioned peacefully, calmly. He asked for ID. Looks like the guy produces one. The woman didn't have one. They said they're known around the area.
Oh my God! He didn't even do nothing.
You have ID?
No, I don't.
So she's saying there that he or we didn't even do anything. I couldn't tell if she said he or we. Well, you probably did something, or else they wouldn't have come along. The police wouldn't have been involved. But that being said, they're just here. They're just getting questioned. You get questioned, you show some ID, and go on about your day if they find that you did nothing wrong. And if it was true that Floyd was the one that was accused of passing the 20 and these two weren't involved in any way, then they really have nothing to be concerned about. Produce the ID, ask some questions, go on about your day. So let's get back to Floyd here. We moved forward a little bit in the video again.
Oh, ouchie, man.
Are you on something right now?
No, nothing. You acting already.
He says he's not on anything, and they question him. So they even question if he's on drugs at the time.
Let's go.
And this is where they try to put him in the car. He's pleading.
I want to watch that car too, so get him.
Stop falling down. Stay on your feet and face the car door. Please. Please. Get out the door, man. I don't want to talk to you, man. Please, let me talk to you, please. You ain't listening to nothing. I know. So we're not going to listen to what you're saying.
Can you watch that car?
Not too much going on in this segment of the video, but you do get some insight. You see George begging the whole time, please, please, don't arrest me, don't put me in the car, whatever he's begging for, and the officers really aren't hearing it. They got a call, they have to do their diligence, do the investigation, but you see his behavior here, and that's what I mentioned. They question it. They question whether he is on drugs or not. Again, that doesn't matter in terms of ultimately what happened in the end, but not having been an officer myself ever, these individuals no doubt come across people like this that behave this way all the time. So they know that it's kind of creating a hostile situation, and it's just making things more difficult. Tensions are kind of escalating a little bit, I'd say.
I'm not that kind of guy, Mr. Officer. Please.
Face away.
Hey, man. Don't leave me by myself, man. Please. I'm just claustrophobic. That's it.
All right, so here he goes. They try to put him in, and he starts talking about claustrophobia.
I won't do nothing to hurt y'all, Mr. Officer. No, sir. Nothing. Why y'all doing me like that, Mr. Officer? Please, crack it for me and stuff, man. I am claustrophobic for real, Mr. Officer.
You got him?
Could you please crack it for me? Please.
Yes, I'm
Remember my
cracking.
name. Stay with me, man.
I will.
Please stay with me, man. Thank you.
They say they'll crack the window for him. He's claustrophobic.
Please, man. That's what my hand. I'm none of y'all, man. Nothing.
got it? Inside in your pocket real quick. I'm listening. And I understand that people do stuff. Alright, he's good. This guy's whatever. There's no worries.
Okay.
Grab a seat.
I'll
I'll roll the windows down, okay?
Please don't take a seat. I'm going in, Mr. Officer. I'm going in. No, you're not. I gotta go in. Take a seat.
Grab a seat.
Why y'all don't believe me, Mr. Officer? Take a seat. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not that kind of guy, man. Take a seat. Yo, I'm gonna die here. Take a seat. I'm gonna die, man. You need to take a seat.
This guy's saying he's gonna die inside the car.
I don't want to go back to that.
I'll roll the windows down. Hey, listen.
Dang, man.
Listen.
I'm not that kind of guy.
My question would be, does he have a documented history? And again, this is something, if I were in the jury, this is what I would want to know. Does he have documented history of claustrophobia? We see a lot of times where law enforcement officers, and granted, they don't know this, but when they encounter individuals, a lot of times individuals, it turns out after the fact, we find out after they get shot, that they have some kind of mental health history. So if I were on the jury, I would want to know, what does his history look like? Does he legitimately have some kind of mental health history or some fear of claustrophobia? Even though he was just sitting in the front seat, even though he did 5 years in jail? Is it legit, or is he just making it up? It's a piece to the puzzle. Let's move a little bit further in the video, where they finally get him into the car.
You get in this car, we can talk. I'm claustrophobic. I'm hearing you, but you're not working with me. God, I'm claustrophobic, man.
Slide your butt over here. I'm going to pull you in.
Get in the car. In the front. No, you're not getting in the front. I'm claustrophobic. I always get in the car. Okay, man, okay. I'm not a bad guy, man. Get in the car. I'm not a bad guy.
Keep saying he's not a bad guy.
Man, please, take a seat. Please, man, please. No, take a seat. I can't choke. I can't breathe.
Saying he can't breathe, even though he's just sitting in the car. I mean, it looks like he wants to lay on the ground, he says. He kind of throws himself out of the car, perhaps it seems, or onto the ground of the vehicle. You hear the officer there say, hey, let's get him on the ground. And then he continues to go on saying that he can't breathe. So there it is, everybody. It's hard to watch, definitely. I mean, it's not as hard to watch, obviously, as 846, but it'd be great to have had that body cam footage to begin with. I don't know if that would have been possible to get that footage right away when the first video was released. I don't know if Ellison did that intentionally, if he withheld that intentionally, if he had the power to put it out there. I don't know if law enforcement, the union, for instance, would have fought that, but I think that regardless of how you feel about whether or not this changes things for you, again, just from a jury perspective, that it would have been great to have this piece of footage to go with the other piece of footage. We wouldn't have known how things would have turned out in terms of where we're at today. But it's interesting to kind of quarterback it and just try to imagine how this possibly could have been a game changer, or it would have changed things for a lot of people in terms of the overall encounter. Even though I'm not going to sit here and say that the cops were the nicest ever, but I think the actions they took during the arrest itself, the questioning of the passengers, moving him to the vehicle, given everything that we've seen and what we know, that part of it seems logical. It seems like they actually treated him pretty well. It took a while for them to get him into the vehicle, or even to prep him into the vehicle. I don't know the training, but it's not like they just threw him in the back seat when he was saying that he was claustrophobic. It looks like they took their time with it, and they offered to roll the windows down, stuff like that. The main question I posed at the beginning was, and I've alluded to it a couple times, but as a juror, when you see these two pieces side by side, I think it's going to be hard to find somebody who hasn't seen the video, the 846 video, and developed feelings about it, and seen the subsequent riots that have happened. Fair trial, I don't know. They've talked about possibly moving it out of Minnesota. I talked about this in the video I did about it a couple months ago, that I felt like they would have had to, at the very least, move it out of Minneapolis. How are they going to find a impartial jury. And now given the two videos, when you put them together, would that change things for people? So where I'm at regarding this is if I was on the jury and you're sitting here telling me that the other officers facing the charges they are, I think this video is I think the video is a lot more helpful in their case. Now, I don't know how they plan on doing this. I would imagine that they're going to try Chauvin first. And they're hoping all the dominoes fall after that. But with the charges initially being upgraded by Keith Ellison once he came on board, I feel like you're going to have a hard time showing intent, because individuals are going to see this and see his conduct and see the officer's behavior. And again, this will be the job of the defense, trying to put yourself into the officer's shoes, trying to help the jury see the mindset of the officer as they were encountering somebody who was displaying this kind of behavior. If I were a juror, I wouldn't so much be concerned about the $20 bill and whether it was counterfeit or not. I would be deeply concerned about his past drug history and of his previous tormenting and conviction of the pregnant woman that sent him to jail. Those are things that, if are allowed into the trial, those are things where I'd really be like, hey, this definitely goes to the character of the guy. But on the other side of it, the officers wouldn't necessarily know his record when they come up to him in his vehicle. It's hard to really keep it packed into this specific incident, right? And that's something that's going to be a task for the jury. And again, something that the defense is going to want to be doing. They're going to want to be bringing in all of this stuff from his past and trying to paint him in such a way where people are going to see him in the bigger picture. They're going to see everything. They're going to see his past. They're going to see this video. And they're going to see, obviously, the other video and then make a decision from there. And again, if that's allowed. I'm not a lawyer, never sat on a jury. I wouldn't mind being on this jury as an alternate and just sitting back and seeing how the deliberations go and what kind of information comes out, what's presented by the prosecution, how they present their case, and the defense. Ultimately, though, I think that this is going to give people pause, because the narrative we were sold about these horrible supremacists and these Nazi cops, it seems to be dispelled in a way in this portion of the video. Now, the rest of the video, that's another story. That's going to be a huge hurdle for the defense to try to overcome, mainly for Chauvin. I think this video bodes pretty well for the other officers involved, and it helps Chauvin as well. I think intent is going to be harder to demonstrate once you show the entire footage of the encounter. The bottom line, though, and something I said about the Rayshard Brooks case, and let me know what you think about this if you're with me on this. I think that in Minneapolis and in Atlanta with the Brooks case, Arbery case, maybe. I think that they perhaps overcharged, considering what we know at this point. I think that in both instances, they're really setting up this kind of racial division, and they're hoping for kind of this race war to be heightened and create a further divide. I really think, and I said this in one of my previous videos, I don't know if it was the Floyd video, the Arbery video, or the Rayshard video, but I said that I really feel like they're setting us up, society at large, and specifically the people in Minneapolis and Atlanta, and these other liberal type cities where their leaders allow things to get out of hand. Seattle, Portland, New York City, maybe Philly, Boston, Austin, you can name these cities, LA, San Francisco, that they really set these cities up to burn the first time, working in conjunction with the media, overcharging and setting these cities up to be burned a second time. That's where I'm at with it at this point. Let me know what you think. Again, I'm interested in hearing what you all think, if you were approaching this through the lens of somebody sitting on the jury, just based on what we know at this time. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. I think that there will be more coming out as we get closer to the trial. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care.